Let's start by taking a look at how you can create and manage the relationships between these tables in the Power BI desktop. As I said, you don't need to flatten the data as you pull it in. You can keep all of the separate tables. So I'm using the data that I had before loaded previously. So I've got things like the date and geography tables, and I've got this sales table here. In my data view, I can see a preview of all of that data. And even though we've got 11 million rows loaded here, I can scroll through them, even drag right down to the bottom to see the last rows really, really quickly. The engine's really powerful, so you can work with very large data sets very simply. The other view that I have here is the relationships view. And this gives me a diagrammatic view of the tables that have been loaded into the Power BI desktop here. So I can see my date table and sales table have got a relationship between them. I can see my sales and product tables have got a relationship, and the product and manufacturer tables. Adding and removing these relationships is really simple. If I just select the relationship, right-click it and hit delete, I can remove them. And creating them is as simple as dragging and dropping the fields that you want between these tables. You can do a few more things through this relationship view, things like hiding these tables as well. The international sales table was the one that I loaded from separate CSV files, and actually that got appended into the sales table, so I don't need this one anymore. So I can just hide that. It'll appear grayed out here, and when I'm in my report view, actually doing some visualization or analysis, that won't appear at all. I can also hide individual columns if they're not useful, and do some more those sort of operations here. There's another way of creating and managing these relationships, as well as seeing this diagrammatic view, and that's through this Manage Relationships dialog. When I select this, I can see all of the existing relationships in my model, and I can see there's that product and manufacturer relationship that I just created. Power BI will do quite a good job of automatically detecting these, but you can run the auto detection again in case you've added any new data or you've changed any columns and want to see if we can find those relationships again. You can also come in and actually manually edit these relationships. This is quite a useful screen because you actually get a preview of the data here, and I can say, I can see my manufacturer ID column and the manufacturer ID column in my manufacturer table. And I can see that the data is the same there. That's the thing that's going to be mapping together. So those are the columns that I want to create this relationship on. There are also some advanced options down here which are really useful, particularly this cardinality and this cross-filter direction option. Cardinality is always talking about whether we have a many-to-one or a one-to-one relationship. Many-to-one is the typical sort of fact-to-dimension type relationship where I've got a sales table with multiple rows per product in it, and then on the one side I'd have the individual products, for example. One-to-one would be more like a reference table or lookup. The other thing to understand here is about cross-filtering directions. By default, relationships typically will actually do cross-filtering in both directions. Cross-filtering in just one direction limits some of the modeling capabilities that you have across this relationship. I can actually use both here. This is perfectly valid for this table. What that allows you to do is do calculations on things across multiple tables. So for example here I've got my date table is related to the sales table and up related to the product table. If I wanted to do a calculation like how many of each distinct product were sold on a particular month or on a particular date, previously if you had set this relationship up to only filter in one direction, it would always filter from the sales table to the date table. But because we can now filter in both directions, I can do this across both of these relationships. There's plenty more documentation online if you want to see this in more detail. We don't need to cover it too much in this lab. So that gives you an overview of all of the ways that you can manage and create relationships through the Power BI desktop across different tables or different data sets that you've pulled in.